Hello, and welcome to the next entry of the Andy Warhol Diaries. Thanks for tuning in to Andy Warhol Diary and the old Razzle Dazzle. This is your pal Mubbo. Today we're going to look at December 20th, 1976. Hope everybody's doing well on this Memorial Day weekend. I ran out early this morning to get some errands done, and the tourist season is in full swing. And now I am going to be at home, not leaving the house for the rest of the weekend. So before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items that, of course, we go over in every video. But in case you're new, if you have any information regarding the murder of my uncle, Charles Pancheri, this happened in Elizabeth, New Jersey in 2011. You can call the tip line at 908-654-TIPS. That's 908-654-TIPS, 908-654-8477. If you'd like to go online and drop some information online, it's totally anonymous. You can go to their website at www.uctip.org. That's www.unioncountytip.org. Thank you for any information. Also, if you like to play along at home, you can read the diary entry as we're going through it, or before or after. You can go to this website right here. Now, the last time I went in, I tried to test it to make sure it was still working, and I kept getting an error. But if you just search for archive.org and then Andy Warhol 1987 or something like that, like leave off the HTTPS, it should bring you to the diary. And today we'll be looking at Monday, December 20th, 1976. On this day, Andy was invited out to lunch by Jamie Wyeth. And if you remember, he's the son of painter Andrew Wyeth. Andy spent Thanksgiving weekend with the Wyeths. And Jamie invites Andy out to not Le Grenouille this time, but Les Pleiades, which is a mountain in Switzerland. But it's also another fancy French restaurant. The Pleiades is now closed, but the owner has reopened a similar place near the Hotel Surrey that has a similar feel as the old restaurant. So if you're in the area, you can go right here. And apparently it's got the same atmosphere as Les Pleiades. What struck me as interesting, and this is where all the Dazzle starts to start razzling, are these lines about the execrable paintings. Now I'm like, oh, execrable, maybe that means awesome. But no, execrable means very bad or unpleasant, or of such poor quality that it is detestable or deserving to be cursed. Now, as you can read here, one of the paintings was auctioned off and purchased by a woman named Felicie Balay, or Balay. Felicie started off in the art world shortly after being introduced to Salvador Dali, and she started handling some of his business affairs in the US and Europe. From there, she became involved with a few art galleries, and she was very busy organizing exhibitions for various artists and galleries. Felicie also spent several years as a board member of the Museum of Cartoon Art. What did I just say? She counted Mort Walker, who did Beetle Bailey, Dick Browne, who did Hagar the Horrible, and Milton Caniff, who drew Terry and the Pirates as her friends, and they would frequently hold court in her gallery. Felicie also published 3 art books, one on Dali, which was a cookbook that contained exclusive recipes from several top French restaurants. The next book was about Picasso, and it was the last book that Picasso approved to be written before his death. And the third book was called Art and Lifestyle, which was the book published about expressionist painter LeRoy Neiman. Now, back in the diary, Jamie Wyeth was at the restaurant with Lincoln Kirstein and Jean Kennedy Smith, and they asked Andy to turn off his tape recorder. And Andy uses the word natch for the first time. Like he's like, they asked me to turn off the tape recorder natch. Now, I've never heard him say that before, and I've never heard him use that word regularly in any of the books that I've read. He may have used it, but I think it's funny that the word natch has been around since, the 1970s. I remember using that in the 80s when like the Valley Girl trend was starting. You all talk like you were from California and use words like natch. I thought that was pretty funny. I think he heard it from one of his younger friends in the factory, and he just adopted it for himself. But it doesn't sound natch coming from him. It doesn't sound like a natural thing that he would say. As for his lunch guest, Lincoln Kirstein, or Kirstein, was an American writer, art connoisseur, philanthropist, and cultural figure around New York City. He was the co-founder of the New York City Ballet, and his father was the vice president of Filene's department store. Filene's was converted to Macy's in the early 2000s. If you're from the Boston area, no doubt you've heard of Filene's bargain basement, where items of clothing were regularly marked down according to an automatic schedule. So, for instance, clothing brought in was marked down by 25% after 12 days. It was marked down to 50% after 18 days, etc. Filene's basement, however, was not absorbed by Macy's. In 2009, it was sold to a liquidation company and eventually filed for bankruptcy in 2011 and closed shortly afterwards. Lincoln Kirstein also kept a diary, and in 2007, the book The Worlds of Lincoln Kirstein was published. Lincoln wrote a lot about casual relationships with men, including with Harvard graduates, sailors, prostitutes, and men he met at the YMCA. He did marry, but his wife claimed to be aware of his extracurricular dalliances. The book is available on Amazon for under $20 and is incredibly detailed, warts and all. It's a pretty big book. It's like over 700 pages. I don't know if that's a bargain or whether the book wasn't well received and that's why it's under $20. I'm not really sure. I have enough books. I can't read this one too. The author, Lincoln, he found himself not the person who published the book, this Martin Duberman, he found himself not invited to Lincoln Center to celebrate Lincoln's life. So he found himself in kind of a Truman Capote-like situation. If you remember, Truman wrote answered prayers, and all of his highfalutin friends kind of turned their backs on him. Apparently, this book is very personal and doesn't hold anything back, especially with Lincoln's sexual dalliances and probably some serious name dropping. Jean Kennedy Smith, who was also at the lunch, we've mentioned her a few times already. She was the sister of JFK and the U.S. ambassador to Ireland. Andy mentions that he thought Jean must have had a crush on Jamie Wyeth, and Jean asked Andy to come to the coat room with her. Now, this is where things get a little weird. Jean showed Andy an American quilt and asked Andy's opinion as to whether it was real. Once Andy confirmed its authenticity, to the best of his knowledge, Jean gifted it to Jamie Wyeth. So Andy says that he went to the coat room with Jean. Jean shows him this quilt, and then they go back into the restaurant. So she's like carrying this quilt around with her. Like, oh, coat room lady, can you take my jacket? Oh, and can you put this giant blanket in the back there with you? Now, American quilts became very popular in the 1970s. They enjoyed a revival led by a Whitney Museum exhibition called Abstract Design in American Quilts. In the past, quilts weren't regarded as respected works of modern art. And I am sorry for anyone who enjoys quilting or likes looking at quilts, but if I'm in a museum, whether it's, the Smithsonian or the Museum of Natural History, I'm walking right past the quilts. I'm walking right past the quilts and the textiles. For me, this stuff is stuff that you pass on your way to like something cooler. Like, oh, can you tell me where the dinosaur exhibit is? Oh yeah, it's past the quilts. Like, I never look at this stuff. I do not consider it respected works of modern art. Andy felt that Jean had a new respect for Jamie Wyeth since he was just named as the Carter Court painter. So the Carter administration hired Jamie Wyeth to be like the official painter for his administration. Jamie painted Carter's portrait for Time magazine, and Jimmy Carter was named Man of the Year in 1977. Andy reminded Jean that he spotted her in Bloomingdale shopping in the shirt department. Jean said that she was buying Christmas presents for her family. Andy commented, probably to the redactress, not to directly to Jean Kennedy, that Jamie Wyeth gets an American quilt, but Jean's family gets regular shirts from Bloomingdale's for Christmas. Now, the next paragraph is a little confusing as Andy doesn't specify exactly when these events occurred. Andy states that Jean was the first to leave the lunch, right? So that's pretty straightforward. The lunch is winding down. Jean Kennedy gets up to leave. Andy then says, quote, and then we relive the faux pas that Lincoln made. It says, quote, and then we relived the faux pas that Lincoln made. Now, I'm not sure if this is a typo or if Andy stammered and the redactress left this in the diary as it is. But the faux pas was, Andy was referring to a comment that Lincoln made about JFK, stating that JFK was corrupt. All Jean said in response was, no, he wasn't. Andy doesn't make it clear if this conversation happens at this lunch or whether it happened in some point in the past. Supposedly, Lincoln forgot that it was JFK's sister when he made this comment, but I don't really believe that. I mean, they look exactly alike. I mean, if you look here, like, where'd you go? Like, they look exactly alike. How could you forget that's JFK's sister, right? You're sitting there looking at her. Here's a bigger one. Lincoln showed his guests, after the lunch, they, meaning Jamie, Andy, and Lincoln, went to Lincoln's house on East 19th Street, also known as Block Beautiful to the locals. And you can see, you see the bought sold history right here. I was last sold in 2026 for about $6 million. And apparently the website said that if you wanted to rent this house, it would run you about $37,000 a month. And you can read a little bit about it here. It really is a beautiful home. I mean, it's a very nice building. It's very unique looking. Lincoln showed his guests the art in the home, and there was some art by Lincoln's brother-in-law, Paul Camus, George Tucker, and Jared French. And a little bit about these artists. Before we get into that, let's be nosy in Lincoln's house. So you have like a dining room, and you could go to this website, Street Easy, and you can get like complete pictures. I didn't want to put like every picture up. Here's a nice living area, and here's a pretty unique galley kitchen. I'm not a fan of galley kitchens because no matter, even if they're big like this, like kind of big, you're just getting in the way of like everybody if there's more than one person in there. And of course, like Mr. Mubbo has this unique gift, as all men do. I think they have this magical ability to stand in front of the drawer that you need to get in. No matter where he moves, that's the drawer I need to get in. Then we have a nice dining room, a bedroom with like an atrium, skylight. It's very, very beautiful, very spacious. So a little about the artists that Lincoln had hanging in his home. Paul Cadmus's painting style was referred to as magic realism. It presents a realistic view of the world while also incorporating magical elements. His art definitely piqued the censor's interest, and you can read an interesting article about Paul and the censorship of queer art through the link on this slide right here. Paul's sister, Fidelma, married Lincoln, and they were sometimes used as models for his paintings, along with many other of his friends. Over the course of his art career from 1931 to 1992, he produced about 120 paintings, and Paul died just a few days short of his 95th birthday in 1999. Next artist Lincoln had in his home is George Tooker. George was American figurative painting, also in the style of magic realism. He was inspired by the Flemish and Danish art and the Italian Renaissance painting and sculpture. His work is also compared to that of Andrew Wyeth and Edward Hopper. And of course, everyone has seen Edward Hopper's masterpiece, Nighthawks. And looking at some of George's work here, you can actually see he painted these very isolating looking paintings. Just one moment. Okay, thanks. His work is compared to Andrew Wyeth and Edward Hopper. Of course, everyone has seen Edward Hopper's painting. Tooker used experiences of modern life in his works, and many portray social withdrawal and isolation. George was in a 5-year relationship with Paul Camus, and he died in Vermont at the age of 90 due to kidney failure. The last one Andy mentions is Jared French, another American artist who specialized in the egg tempera medium. Along with both George Tooker and Paul Camus, what's notable about Jared French is Jared started a photographic collective called Pa Jama with his wife, Margaret, and Paul Camus, whose names make up the collective. So you have Pa for Paul, Ja for Jared, and Ma for Margaret. This collective worked primarily on Fire Island, New York, Provincetown, Mass., and Nantucket. The three would photograph each other wearing various costumes and objects to create scenes reminiscent of the magic realism that was present in their paintings. The pictures were primarily black and white and featured nude figures. Jared died in Rome Italy in 1988. Back in the diary, Andy notes that the artwork Lincoln has are all by realists who had done paintings of muscle boys. And then Andy slyly notes that Lincoln did not own any of Andy's paintings. When Andy left Lincoln's house, he walked over to Union Square and he worked for the rest of the afternoon. And that's it for this day in the diary. We're going to take a quick look at this day in history. Monday, December 20th, 1976. Letters and poems by Lord Byron and Percy Shelley were among some 19th century papers found in a trunk stored at Barclays Bank on Pall Mall Street in London. Now, where does that sound familiar? Now, Andy had, whether you believe it or not, Andy had Valerie Solanis's her script for her Scum Manifesto locked in a trunk. Some people say that Andy just forgot that it was in there. And then there are some people who feel that Andy thought it was so horrible and so awful that he locked it in the trunk so that no one else would find it. And believe it or not, that was the main reason why Valerie went up to his offices and shot him. She was convinced that Andy was going to take this manuscript and make his own film out of it. So I think it was a little of both. I think Andy did lock it in there because he thought it was terrible, but then I think he just forgot about it. If you've seen the pictures of Andy's apartment, he really was a borderline hoarder. When guests came over the house, he would only let them in the foyer. They were not allowed to walk through the home. And after Andy's death, people came in and they were looking through Andy's things, and they were amazed that he lived the way that he did. Like the way that he acted when he was at work did not give away the fact that he was basically living just floor to ceiling in stuff. Like he just had a real problem putting stuff away or getting rid of things. He wanted to just keep everything with him. Back to the day in history, Lord Byron, of course, was a poet and author. He was a poet and an author, and Percy Shelley was also a poet, but he may be better known as Mary Shelley's husband. Mary Shelley, of course, wrote the story of Frankenstein. And according to a manuscript expert, the documents were quite astonishing and were estimated to be worth about 1 million pounds back in 1976. So that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. The next entry we'll be doing is December 21st, 1976. Thanks for watching. Please come back again and see the next entry. And don't forget about the new word we just learned today. Mubbo.